Summertime and the living is easy. It's summer. Time to travel to a beautiful location, relax, and enjoy some music. Which apparently is what all of the classical musicians do, because we can't find any to do classical classroom episodes in town. So, we headed to the hills. And lo, we discovered there are these magical musical oases, whatever, called classical music festivals. Every summer, students, performers, and orchestras spend their supposed time off making yet more music. Each year, Classical Classroom is going to highlight a different festival. We're starting this summer at one of the premier festivals in Aspen, Colorado. The Aspen Music Festival in School is one of the top classical music festivals in the U.S. Over 300 classical music events are packed into 8 weeks. With all of those incredible musical opportunities and great teachers, the Aspen Music Festival is a real incubator for classical music careers. You heard about that in our last episode with pianist Orly Shaham. In this episode, we talk about what it means to have a classical music career today and how music festivals fit into that scheme. We hope you enjoy traveling to Aspen with us. Come along, won't you? Hello everyone and welcome to the Classical Classroom. I'm Daisha Clay and here with me today, all the way from the Aspen Music Festival, is Robert McDuffie. He's a violinist who is performing at the Aspen Music Festival. He's been a soloist with pretty much every major orchestra in the world. He's the founder of the R.E.M. Chamber Music Festival. He holds a Distinguished University Professor Chair at Mercer University in his hometown of Macon, Georgia. He also leads the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings at Mercer. Speaking of Georgia, he's working on a collaboration with Mike Mills from R.E.M., which I hope we can talk about a little bit. And Philip Glass dedicated a piece of music to him, which I hope we get to hear over the course of this conversation. Robert McDuffie, welcome to the Classical Classroom.
Hey, thanks for asking me.
Yeah, so tell us what you're doing at Aspen. I looked at the schedule, it looks like a bunch of stuff.
I just got here, trying to become acclimated to the altitude. It's kind of working. My lips are really dry.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful up here. They have me busy. I'm here 2 weeks this time. It's my 39th consecutive summer in Aspen. I came here as a kid, really cocky Juilliard kid. But I started loving music here at Aspen. Aspen helped open up the door to my future. So it's such a privilege to come back. I just finished, I'm talking to you after a 2-hour class where I heard 4 students play here at the concert hall. Mm-hmm. It's more of a performance for them, and I try not to get in the way. And it really is pretty amazing to hear the talent at this festival. You know, it's called the Aspen Music Festival, but I think it's more of a school.
Yeah,
it's a place for inspiration. Students are on stage with their mentors here. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a place of idealism, and it certainly was that for me when I was a student. But this week in particular is pretty jammed. It's had the class today. I played yesterday for a fundraising event, so I had to ask for money. Mm-hmm. Thursday is a science-related lecture and performance where we'll be talking about differences between old Italian violins. And Sunday, I play, I guess, my main concert with the orchestra in the tent, and then I have another performance. But a lot of friends up here, and I'm just getting started. So
is it basically just like a big reunion every year for you?
It is, and sometimes it gets overwhelming because I do have to practice, and practicing is a really lonely exercise.
Yeah,
and I love people. I have a lot of friends. I'm very social, and I've got that conflict. I've had it my whole life.
Oh, God, me too. I completely understand that. Like, how much downtime do you actually get from all of the work that you have to do while you're there?
Well, I have to make it. I mean, I should set aside 5 hours of work with, turn off the iPad, turn off the phone, mm-hmm. and just live with whatever I'm working on. If I can do that, then I can have fun the rest of the day.
Yeah. Nice.
Not that practicing isn't fun. I mean, when it starts to sound good, it's fun.
When that whole work part of it is over and you're just having fun.
Yeah.
Well, and this is kind of a good segue into what we were going to talk about today, which is sustaining a career in classical music, specifically in the 21st century. Where do festivals play into that? Or, we can start at a different point too if you want, but that seems like an important part of what classical musicians do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. The festivals are playing a more important role these days. The real world, there's the festival world and there's the real world. Mm-hmm. Okay, the real world to me is almost kind of like the academic year from September to May when orchestras have their subscription series and the recital series and you play your concerts and everything. But the festival world, I think, has a larger role than it's ever had before. I think the idealism of making beautiful music in a beautiful place was always special. Now it's even, I think, more needed because the classical music world is changing as we speak. Mm-hmm. The landscape has shifted. There are not many 52-week orchestras out there anymore. There are fewer recital presenters. It doesn't mean that classical music is suffering. I don't think that's the right word. I think it's just going through a correction where it's going to become more musician-centric, where musicians will be making more decisions about their own future instead of relying on nonprofits and symphonies and boards to determine their future. They have to become independent contractors.
Yeah, this sounds a little bit like what's going on in the rock music world, where musicians are kind of breaking away from the traditional label model and kind of striking out on their own because there's so much technology is so available to be able to do it on your own, and it kind of cuts out the middleman in a way.
Exactly. And classical music, is so much smaller, and I think musicians need to understand how a nonprofit works. I think there has to be a healthier relationship between musicians and the board members who make decisions in the nonprofits that determine the future of classical music. Mm-hmm. So it really is becoming more of an independent contracting world. Mm-hmm. So having said that, you need to have your batteries charged, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what the festivals do. That's what Aspen does.
I see. Okay.
The people come here to realize why they love music. Mm-hmm. And that needs to carry through the year when they're dealing with lockouts and strikes and and orchestras that are downsizing, where they sometimes feel that they're not protected. But we have to know why we do it. And it's places like Aspen and Tanglewood and Music Academy of the West and so many festivals that reinforce, that validate why we do this. Mm-hmm. And it's because we are so fortunate to be messengers of great art. It is just the greatest thing. And that pull needs to be even stronger to sustain a musician during those 9 months. Yeah. So they know that there's a purpose, a real purpose for fighting for what you believe in. Right. Hopefully not fighting against anybody, but fighting for something beautiful and great and wonderful and meaningful and relevant.
Well, right. Well, very relevant. But say I'm a young musician and I've made up my mind. I am going to have a career as a musician. Walk me through what I should do. Like, what are my major steps in this career?
Practice.
Practice.
If you really want to be a musician, obviously, if you're good enough to be, and if you feel you're good enough, and this is where artists differ from lawyers and business people. Lawyers inherently think of the worst case scenario. I think artists have this, sometimes naively so, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes knowledge is not always power. Mm-hmm. If you believe in what you're doing, and if you see the end game, and if you visualize where you want to be, mm-hmm. then you need to dedicate yourself to it. And there should be no obstacles. And if there are, that's when you need to become educated on how to navigate through whatever maze is thrown at you.
So that's a question. Like, what about education? Is that people people are starting to go to apprenticeships. That's kind of making a comeback as opposed to going to a 4-year school, getting an education, going into horrible debt, and then maybe not having a job when you get out. What's that like in the musician world? Do you need to do that? Do you need to attend a Juilliard or Eastman or any of those schools?
That's a really good question. When I got out of Juilliard, there was a much greater margin for error. I mean, one could have a lot of false starts and end up making it. There are fewer slots now for graduates who come out of the Juilliards and the Eastmans. Juilliard is still great. Juilliard is a great school. I think that there needs to be a combination of conservatory training and a specific education that addresses and caters to the entrepreneurial musician.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm really happy and proud of the school that we started in Georgia, the Center for Strings at Mercer. Mercer University has a really good law school, it has a really good business school, and it has a really good liberal arts school. Our students, and they are conservatory level students, our students go to Juilliard in New England and Peabody and Cincinnati and McGill and Indiana and USC for their master's and doctorates after they leave us. Mm-hmm. But at the school, at Mercer University, they take 2 years of liberal arts, and then they go into a business-centric curriculum where they study contract law and dispute resolution and nonprofit and public speaking and micro and macroeconomics.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And that is required. And you know what? It fits into the larger requirements of our accreditation agency that certifies schools of music. We've been able to do this by tapping into the parts of the universities that work. Mm-hmm. And another thing, we decide what the students are going to take. We're not going to sit back and say, well, if you really want to take French and do you want to do a little bit of that, you can do that. It'll help you down the road. No, if you want to come here, we're going to make you better, and we're also going to prepare you for the real world. Yeah. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting combination. I don't know if other schools are doing that or not, but I've talked to so many artists of different kinds who, an artist is a creative person. A creative person tends to be focused on the thing that they're creating, on their art. But the reality is that if you want to keep doing that art, you've got to be able to have the practical skills to deal with, how do you make money? What kinds of contracts are you going to be signing, and what are those going to look like, and what should you look out for, and sort of the management side of things. A lot of artists don't get that training.
Well, it's not just about talent anymore. Yeah. We feel that this curriculum is certainly not a panacea, but we feel that it will, in this large pool of graduates that we see every year, that our graduates will be in a better position to become successful. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like they're going to be equipped with a lot more than most of the artists that I know. Well, okay, so you go to school, you get yourself an education. What kinds of careers are available for classical musicians today?
Another great question, because some of those careers don't even exist yet.
Ooh, do tell.
Well, how do I know? I mean, it's really up to it's going to be up to the entrepreneurial musician, right, to decide what to do. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, I think if you just follow an entrenched playbook, you'll be stuck. Yeah. So a perfect example of, I think, fantastic entrepreneurship is the classical music nightclub called Le Poisson Rouge in New York. Mm-hmm. Started by two cellists who graduated from Manhattan School of Music. Mm-hmm. They turned the old Village Gate Theater into the, hip place for classical music. They start their concerts late at night. I think their motto is serving art and alcohol. I think that's very cool. And it's a venue where a listener is not intimidated. The audience is part of the whole experience. Yeah, the people who go to those venues downtown won't go north of 23rd Street. They don't go to Carnegie Hall. They don't go to Lincoln Center. Mm-hmm. They get their fix down there.
I've watched some of those shows online, and it's really interesting how the musicians are set up. It's like they set up and the audience is all around them. It's really neat. So that it's kind of an immersive experience instead of just staring at some people who are far away up on the stage. They're like right there on the floor.
Yeah, I mean that really worked. I think it's healthy to, knowledge is not always power. Well, but you certainly need to have the tools, to get there. I would look at the guys in Silicon Valley. All these companies from Google to LinkedIn. I don't know where Uber is based, but those guys just shook up entrenched models. Mm-hmm. And I think musicians, so many people need to do that, but musicians, since that's the world I live in, I think that's something they need to do. That's what the guys who started Le Poisson Rouge did. Mm-hmm. It is about repertoire. It is about accessibility. It is about not punishing your audience. It is about making a living. It's just the days of someone making a living playing in a symphony orchestra for 52 weeks are becoming numbered.
Yeah.
I think it's analogous to the Rust Belt in northern, United States. The mills, the factories where people worked. There were pensions. They were there for a lifetime. The average person will probably go through, and I'm not talking about musician now. The average person, well, actually, the guy who started LinkedIn is telling everybody he thinks everybody will change a job every 2 years. I think that's optimistic. Plus, he'll make a lot more money if that's indeed the case. But
that's true.
But musicians are going to have to realize they can't just rely on one entity. They're going to have to shake it up, mix it up.
So you're saying
that look for many opportunities.
You can't, like, once upon a time there was sort of a prefabricated path for people to follow when you would go from high school into some music school, and then you would go on to graduate school, and then you would sign on with some symphony somewhere, right. or maybe
if you were lucky, and if you were a soloist, you would. You'd start making records. You might you'd be playing on the radio. You might be playing on TV if you were lucky. It was but it was a path that was well known. Mm-hmm. It's not the case anymore. You know what? There are no record stores anymore. Yeah, there are no music critics anymore. Yeah. It's just a totally different. It is a different world, and we just don't know how it's all going to shake out. But I can tell you one thing: it's going to come from the musicians themselves. They cannot rely on orchestras, boards, others to determine their own economic destiny.
So it's a bit more nebulous, and you have to be sort of flexible, yet prepared to deal with that.
Right. You're going somewhere, but you don't necessarily know exactly where it is. So
speaking of Le Poisson Rouge, didn't you play there fairly recently? Weren't you? Philip Glass, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, dedicated a piece of music to you called "The American Four Seasons." Is that right?
Right. I haven't played. I think I played part of that piece at LPR, and I played there several times. I bring the students from the school down in Georgia every other year to Le Poisson Rouge for their New York experience, and we have a good time. We combine it, and it also becomes a benefit for my festival in Rome, the R.E.M. Chamber Music Festival. So people just have a good time and hear very talented young people, and it's the perfect place. I mean, I love the top 40 of classical music. I still play it. I still play a lot of Mendelssohn concertos and Bruch and Beethoven and those guys. But my Lord, I mean, if I keep doing it, I mean, you do try to find new and fresh things in those pieces, but I've become a better musician, I think, because I've played music of living American composers in the so-called classical music world, but also crossing over to composers like Philip Glass, who is not he wouldn't call himself a classical composer. He mixes it up. He does a lot of theater work and as well as operas, and I think Philip Glass is America's Vivaldi. I think they both have the same style of writing. And that's when I asked him to write this piece. I said, I hope you don't mind, but I actually think you're America's Vivaldi. And he was flattered, and he agreed to write an American Four Seasons with the same instrumentation, with one exception. instead of the harpsichord, which Vivaldi used, I asked Mr. Glass to insert a synthesizer to tap into that rock and roll Philip Glass signature that turned people like David Bowie on, and David Byrne and Paul Simon. He loved the idea, and it became a very successful piece, and it rocks out. It's really, really fantastic.
I also mentioned that you are teaming up with Mike Mills from R.E.M., which is super cool. And I'm wondering, is collaborating with somebody from sort of cross-genre, is that part of what the new classical music career is looking like?
Yes.
All right.
The answer is yes.
Yeah.
And especially when you get to my age, picking up on that experience that it's still going on. That project still has legs, but it started about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. I went to Mike Mills. We grew up together in Macon. We sang in church choir together. Really? When we were 12.
Wow.
And we stayed friends. I've always been really proud of him. And I just went to him and said, hey, you want to write a violin concerto for a violin and rock band with a string orchestration? He said, I'm scared, but let's do it. And he's already written two of the songs, and they are incredible.
So
what
cool.
he does with the violin is exactly what he did with R.E.M. He would write the music using Pro Tools and then hand it over to Michael Stipe, the lead singer, and Stipe would add the lyrics.
Yeah.
He's doing something similar here. He writes the rock and roll stuff for the band, and he's handed it to David Malamud, a really fine arranger. And David writes out the violin part, and he fleshes it out with a string orchestration. And that's kind of the way we're going to go, and it seems to be working so far. So Mike doesn't have to have the pressure of saying, oh my gosh, I've got to write out a violin part. That's not what he does. That's not what he wants to do. It's not what I want him to do.
That's really exciting, but you reached out to him because you were interested in, crossing
I was totally
genres.
Selfish. I wanted to be a better musician. That's why I went to him.
And you think, would you recommend that to a young musician too? Because I've noticed that a lot. Like I was just listening to a CD by So Percussion, and the music was written by Bryce Dusner of The National, which is a rock band, but it's a very classical music sounding CD. And I've seen so many collaborations like that going on. So you think that's the?
Oh, I think it's a wonderful natural thing to do, but only if it's sincere. I wouldn't recommend anybody to do something that goes against their own musical sensibilities or where they want to go or what they want to say.
Do you think that it's harder for classical musicians today? I mean, it's different. We've definitely covered that, but do you think it's harder to make it?
Again, you are just full of such good questions here. It's always been hard. When there were no unions, 52-week players and major orchestras were making less than $10,000 a year. That's hard. Now we've kind of made a turn, and you can't rely on the orchestras anymore. I'm just speaking for orchestral musicians. Yes, it's a harder with technology just overtaking so much of society and how we work and how we get things done and how we think and how we want to achieve things. Yes, technology is taking over. There are fewer tasks in the world for human beings right now, and that includes musicians. So it's a different challenge, and it will always be hard.
Yeah, but just in sort of different ways as technology evolves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how well I would do. I would hope I would do well in this world. I did kind of ride piggyback on the establishment, and once I got established myself, then I felt I had the freedom to go outside. Musicians today need to go out of the box from the get-go, and that's the difference.
My last question is, what's a tough time that you've had in your career as a musician? Now, you're a successful person. You've been playing for a long time. You've played with all of these different orchestras. You've seen the world. But what was it like when you were trying to make it? What was something tough that you had to overcome? And what are some words of encouragement that somebody might draw from that?
Never compare yourself to anybody else. That was my issue at the beginning when I looked at other people's success. I think there was a lot of unneeded stress when I was coming out and seeing that things were happening for other people that weren't happening to me. I think if you truly believe in what you do, you'll make it happen. It may not be the way you dreamed it up, one night before you went to bed, but it'll be a circuitous route. You just have to believe that, and then you'll be at the end of the when you've reached that and you look back at your journey, you'll be shocked at how you got there, because it's certainly not how you drew it up. But if you really believe that and think about yourself and what you need to do and what your talents are, then go with that. Don't waste your time thinking about what other people are doing.
So what you're saying is, like Bruce Lee said, be like water. Just flow.
Water.
Robert McDuffie, it's been really great to talk to you. This is a really interesting conversation. I hope
this was great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I hope you have a great time at the festival.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope you get acclimated to the altitude soon.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that does it for this episode of Classical Classroom. For more Classroom, go to houstonpublicmedia.org/classroom. Subscribe to us on iTunes, follow us on SoundCloud. You can also hear us on mobile apps, etc. Show your love for us to the world by rating and reviewing us. It's cheaper than a ceremony, and it only takes a second. Send me an email at dclay@houstonpublicmedia.org. And don't forget, we're tweeting daily. So, find us on the Twitters. Thanks today to audio producer Todd El Lobo Rojo Hoslander for making us sound good. Thanks to program director St. John Flynn for being our guiding light in the storms of life as our tiny boat bobs to and fro. Thanks to editor Mark DeClaudio for his piercing, hungry eyes. Thanks to intern Nick Dolworth for being out this week. Thanks to Robert McDuffie for being here, and to the good people at the Aspen Music Festival for making this happen. Thanks to me for saying words, but most of all, thanks to you for listening. We'll catch you next time.